session, and then we'll be requesting Julian to introduce Wendy, and after that, no, I'm introducing Wendy. Sorry, I'm got a little bit confusion. I'm looking for my screen, my running sheet. So I'm introducing Wendy, and after that, session. Yes, and then Julian is introducing
we'll be requesting Julian to introduce
what is it, Wendy, and after that, no, I'm introducing Wendy. Sorry, I'm looking for my screen, my running sheet. There is some problem. So I'm introducing Wendy, and after that, session.
This is going to be an interesting
Sorry
webinar.
to intervene. Hello,
There is a
Dr.
delay.
Rajiv.
Yes, can you, because I was not speaking, but someone was speaking for me.
Hello.
Now everything is okay?
I'm sorry. Yes, we have started the live streaming and we are going to start letting everyone in. So if you're all prepared, then we can start.
Okay. So if you give me, sorry, Pooja, if you
I'm
give
sorry.
us, but why we are having echoing things? So do I have the other window
Is
open?
this? No, that was mine. I'm sorry.
Okay. So maybe you can, okay. So just give us 1 or 2 minutes and I'm.
So the
feeling
live
little bit
streaming is on
right now.
already.
Oh, live stream is already on.
Yes, that's all right, Rajiv. In YouTube, very few people will be there.
Okay. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm very much excited to welcome you all for this important session. And my name is Rajiv Warshne. I'm Professor and Director, Center for Crop and Food Innovation and International Chair in Agriculture and Food Security with the Food Futures Institute at Murdoch University in Australia. It's a great pleasure for me for this important session being organized by our Center for Crop and Food Innovation from Murdoch University in collaboration with Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, ACIAR, the Crawford Fund, Asia Pacific Association of Agricultural Research Institutions, APARI, and the Forum for Agricultural Research for Africa, FARA. We are organizing this session as a part of the International Borlaug Dialogue of the World Food Prize Foundation. And as we know, the theme of the Borlaug Dialogue this year is harnessing change. We have an impressive list of speakers who are the world leaders in international agriculture. So please join me in welcoming our speakers, Professor Wendy Amberger, CEO of ACIAR, Professor Prabhu Pingali, Director, Tata Cornell Institute at Cornell University, Professor Apollinaire Dijking, Director General of International Livestock Research Institute and Senior Director of CGR Livestock-Based Systems, Dr. Robin Elders, Senior Consulting Fellow from Chatham House, UK, and Dr. Ravi Khetarpal, Executive Secretary for APARI. Thank you everyone for joining us despite of your busy schedule. I know that some of our speakers, they are just starting their day, they are sitting in the hotels, and I know Professor Prabhu Pingali, he's in US right now, midnight, and Wendy just landed from her business trip. So I know that all of you are very busy people, but thank you very much for joining this session. We are really grateful to you. Now, I would like to request our co-organizers to introduce themselves briefly. So in this regard, first of all, I would like to invite Dr. Julian Biddle. Julian, please.
Thank you so much, Rajiv. I'm so pleased to join the session today. My name's Julianne Biddle. I'm Senior Director of Multilateral and Government Partnerships at the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research. Thanks, Rajiv.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian. I would like to now request Dr. Ravi Khetarpal.
Thank you, Rajiv. My name is Ravi Khetarpal. I'm the Executive Director of Asia Pacific Association of Agriculture Research Institution. It's a pleasure to join this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravi. And we have other two organizers, but because of some other engagements, they couldn't join. But I would like to mention about Kathy Reed. She is from Crawford Fund. She is the Director for Outreach, Public Affairs and Communications at the Crawford Fund. And also other co-organizer, we have Dr. Egre Agumura. He is the third executive director and head of the mission of FARA, Forum for Agriculture Research for Africa. And he has been part for FARA for about last 17 years in various roles. And he also served as the Director of Research and Innovation at Secretariat, where he also serves as the Deputy Executive Director earlier. So together with Julian, Kathy, Ravi, and Agre, we put this program together. And we got as I said, very impressive list of speakers. And very briefly, before we start the session, a background about this session. We all know that the challenges related to food and nutrition security are very complex and cannot be effectively addressed by any single organization or country acting alone. We also know for sure that science innovations and partnerships among various partners and stakeholders is key towards contributing to food and nutrition security. With this objective, our center teamed up with the leading organizations, including ACIR, Crawford Fund, APARI, and FARA, in collaboration with the World Food Prize Foundation to host this session. And the title of the session is Harnessing Science Innovations for a Sustainable, Equitable, and Nourishing Food Systems. Our center undertakes research in crop genomics, genetics, gene editing, molecular biology, physiology, soil and water management, new agricultural technology, including remote sensing and robotics, and the developing area of food technology at Murdoch University. And our Center for Crop and Food Innovation, aligned with the university's sustainability theme, thoughtfully trains and collaborates with researchers from developing countries in the area of food and nutrition security, and contributes towards achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal, especially Goal 2, SDG 2, Zero Hunger. As I mentioned, our co-organizers, ACIR, Crawford Fund, APARI, and the FARA, they support and collaborate with research organizations and partners in various countries to improve agriculture in Africa, East Asia, South and West Asia, and the Pacific. They deliver specific development outcomes and identify opportunities and partnerships for international agriculture research and capacity building to create innovative agri-food systems towards contributing food and nutrition security in Asia and Africa. So we believe that with this excellent panel, this session will provide participants with a valuable platform to engage in discussions and gain insights into diverse areas of food system and for establishing a sustainable, equitable, and nourishing food system. We believe that by leveraging the knowledge and experiences shared by our panelists in this session, we will aspire to foster global cooperation in tackling the intricate issues surrounding food and nutrition security. So this was brief about that session. And as I said, that we got very, very eminent speakers, and I'm very much happy to mention that we already got more than 150 participants joining in the Zoom, and several are on that YouTube. So we are very excited, and we had registration with more than 700 people from about 58 countries. So this really highlights that importance of the session and also that our panelists. In this series, I have great pleasure to introduce Professor Wendy Amberger, who is the 7th CEO of ACIR and also the President of Australia's Policy Advisory Council for International Agriculture Research, and an independent director of grain producers at South Australia, and the director of the International Association of Agricultural Economists and a board member of Food Bank South Australia. Previously, Professor Amberger established and led the Center for Global Food and Resources at the University of Adelaide, which engaged with government and industry to make changes in agriculture and food systems. She was also a professor in the School of Economics and Public Policy, all while serving on the board of trustees for ICRISAT, where I also worked for about 17 years. She is an expert in agricultural economics and food policy, and we are very honored to have you, Wendy, as a distinguished guest with more than 20 years of experience. So floor is yours, and please join me in welcoming Wendy for this session.
Thank you so much, Rajiv, and thank you very much to the organizers for putting this impressive panel together. So I'm really pleased to be able to be here and participate, and I really appreciate being invited. So I think we each have 10 minutes to speak, so I'm going to try to keep within 10 minutes. And if I think that I'm going over, I'll probably skip a few slides. But I think we all know the title of the presentation, but I thought that I would, and now I'm just struggling to get my slides to go. Okay, there we go. Thank you. I think the topic everyone's aware of, but I thought that you might not be aware of what the Australian Centre for International Agriculture Research is. We call it ACR in Australia. Some of you across the globe might know of it. You might have worked with us before, but as Rajiv said, I've recently in the middle of August taken over as CEO. I'm very honored to be in this role because I've worked on ACR projects for most of the 17 years that I've lived in Australia. And the work that I believe the work ACR does with many partner organizations who give an immense amount of in-kind is very high impact. And I have seen personally how much it changes people's lives in the countries that we work in, as well as in Australia. So ACR is an independent body. It's very unique globally. It's 41 years old. It was actually established by the government and sits in Australia's foreign affairs portfolio. So I actually report directly to the foreign minister, and we're part of the ODA, as we call it in Australia, or the Overseas Development Assistance Program. Currently, we work with more than 30 countries in what we call the Indo-Pacific region, ranging throughout, Australia's near neighbors into Eastern and Sub-Saharan Africa. Our main aim is to boost agricultural productivity, sustainability, and food system resilience in a climate sensitive and nutrition sensitive, as well as gender sensitive way. We place a high priority on capacity building. So a lot of the work we do, including all of our research projects and programs, involve capacity building with our country partners and the teams that we work with. We're constantly needing to evaluate impacts, and we learn lessons from those evaluations. And now I just need to change the slide. For some reason, it seems to be changing slowly. Whoops, we'll go back. Okay, so the way we work is very much in partnership. And I want to emphasize this because I think it's relevant for some points I'm going to make about agriculture innovations and what I believe we need to do. So we work really hard with what we call our partner countries, and that's countries where Australia has a mandate as part of our overseas development program, our international development policy to work. And when we work in partnership, we consult very closely with our partner countries to find out what it is they would like us to work on. Sometimes that's capacity building, sometimes it's access to a technology, and sometimes it's access to researchers or funding to do research projects, or all of the above. But we try to determine within that system that we've been asked to work in, what types of innovations are needed, where are innovations in interventions required in that system. So originally when ACR started, I think most of the work 30 to 40 years ago was very much focused on farm. And I would say over the last 10 to 15 years, a lot of the work that ACR now does involves that entire value chain or the entire food system, increasingly work on policy and partnering with agribusiness. So I want to just make a few key messages that I want to say in the next set of slides. First of all, I think there's often misunderstanding about when we talk about agriculture and food innovation, that it's just technologies, hard technologies, or new varieties of crops, that it's very, very traditional, basic science. And I want the innovations and the assistance that we're being increasingly asked to provide from our Australian innovation system is much more than just the technology. It's oftentimes around policy training, around helping understand new business models. And as an ag economist, ACR projects that I was involved in when I was at the university were often bringing in those more rethinking through value chains and business models and policy issues. So also innovation is really complex. We all know that. And it requires an enabling environment. And that's something more and more that we're looking at in terms of the policies, in terms of the private sector investment. we need to consider all of those roles in the food system, not just the smallholder farmer, but everything, including the consumer, including the markets. And the other point I really hope we can walk away from today, investment in innovation for food system resilience, I think we probably would all agree is needed now more than ever. And I'm constantly saying that message, including next week, for example, I'm talking to our National Farmers Federation, the annual conference, and I'll be talking about the need to invest more in agriculture R&D. And we know that that is really because all of these things happening in this environment, not just our natural environment, not just because of climate change, but also because of so much is changing in terms of modernizing markets and globalization. And then, of course, the conflict in different areas in the world. And we know that food security can lead to overall security and reduction in some of those conflicts. So just to mention, I think when we think of innovations, and this is certainly something that ACR has been really involved in over its entire 40 years, is process innovations. If we think about different types of innovation, I think these are the ones that are, very traditional agriculture innovations. So, and ACR has done, extensive work in terms of very traditional areas. So, for example, recent ones are something that we call the chameleon water sensor, that's been developed by CSRO, funded by ACR, and that is basically, if you look on the left-hand side of the slide there, it's a sensor that measures whether or not you need to irrigate, and it's reduced the need to haul water, reduced water overuse, and increased productivity. We've dealt with many pest and disease issues and introduced technologies from new varieties of wheat resistance. And a lot of that actually has been with CGIAR centers. And so new varieties of crops, new varieties of livestock, and through extensive work with our international partners. Just examples there, Wheat Blast in Bangladesh is a recent one, and one that we're working on right now is biopesticides to combat coffee berry borer in PNG. Lots of work on looking at technologies and changing management practices to bring in conservation agriculture practices, sustainable intensification as some examples. But innovations that sometimes we don't think about, and that I think that we need to do more of, and that ACR is increasingly investing kind of beyond those process type innovations. And that's into looking at how we can help smallholders develop new products. So I have Gallup nuts, that's a project that was in PNG, and that involved extensive research post farm, what we would call farm gate, but it's really forest gate, looking at the nutritional properties of those nuts, how you can stabilize the nuts so that that you can have a longer shelf life, the marketing of it. We've worked extensively with the sipe, for example, on different insect uses, both for animal feed and for different nutrient uses. Then there's been extensive work on looking at markets and developing new markets, global GAP certification, and how can we have a functioning value chain and help farmers that are getting GAP certified? How can we help them get those products to market, dealing with whole of value chain issues from post-harvest to certification, and what's the right business model for that? So I just want to remind us, and this is, I think I've said a couple of times now, ACR is increasingly investing in innovations that go beyond those process innovations. And of course, policies, extensive work on looking at what policies are going to be more smallholder inclusive, that are going to create that enabling environment where the development work that we do can be scaled out. And just a reminder too, that this is really important work for social scientists and agricultural economists, behavioral economists, to understand the individual needs of the people that we're meant to be working with. So in this case, this slide is around, different needs of smallholder farmers, and our research and research, all kinds of different people's research has found that, within certain communities, these women in this picture, all of them would have different circumstances and their individual needs in terms of to adopt a technology or what types of innovations they need and what would help their household would be very different based on their household circumstances. And so increasingly, when we're looking at innovation needs, we need to be looking again beyond those process innovations, very, very important. And just some examples of where, when we think about that whole system, there's multiple interventions and multiple innovations that are needed. So we had a fish ladders project that's going on in Laos down in the lower left-hand corner, where dams were built to help farmers access water for irrigation, but then that meant that it disrupted the natural flow of fish, and downstream, people dependent upon that fish, we're having massive food security issues when they can't access the fish. So therefore, ACR did fairly extensive work that brought in engineering and all kinds of different scientists, including social scientists, to develop fish ladders. There's other work that we've done in terms of working with the private sector to incentivize farmers to adopt things in dairy value chains to reduce bacterial content, and we form new business models. So just for time's sake, I won't go into any more of those. But the final slide I want to make is that it's really important when we're looking at innovations to remember that we need to consider that whole system, and that there's opportunities to do innovation in terms of business models, looking at how we can encourage or really change that system to make sure that we're having high impact, to look at policies to create an enabling environment. So increasingly, our innovation system in this space requires integrating our research, technology development, private sector value chains, extension, education, and governance, and then across all of the different disciplines, and bringing in disciplines that may have never worked in development before. So we need to think about what we need to invest in, where do we invest, who do we work with, and how do we partner differently? And that's something that we're really working on in ACR to try to make sure that that we're able to have better impact and sustainable impact and address some of these global issues like climate change, nutrition, and gender. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wendy. This was fantastic. And I think that you have provided very nice overview, not only about the ACR and achievements, but even for the entire session. And among many things, I think this was very clear that innovation does not include just the usual practices or processes, but also the policies and business model. This is really fantastic. Thank you very much, Wendy.
You.
And now I would like to request my co-organizers, Julian, to continue for introducing next two speakers, Prabhu Pingali, and then after that, Robin Elders. So Julian, please.
So I have the pleasure of introducing Professor Prabhu Pingali, Director of Tata Cornell Institute, Cornell University in the USA. So Professor Pingali is a professor at the Charles H. Dyson School of Applied Economics and Management, and the founding director of the Tata Cornell Institute for Agriculture and Nutrition at Cornell University. Previously, he was Deputy Director of the Agriculture Development Division of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Director of the UN Food and Agriculture Association's Agriculture and Development Economics Division. Additionally, he was working with the CJR for 15 years, both with IRRI in the Philippines and then with CIMMET in Mexico. For his contributions, Dr. Pingali was elected a Fellow of the American Agricultural Economics Association, the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and a member of the US National Academy of Sciences. Dr. Pingali has over 4 decades of experience working with international agricultural development organizations as a research economist, development practitioner, and a senior manager. I'll hand over to Dr. Pingali. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Julian. And thank you, Rajiv, for inviting me to this panel. It's kind of late at night, but I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk to all of you. I'm going to use my 10 minutes to talk about drylands. I think drylands are a really important part of the future of inclusive and equitable and sustainable food systems. And I'm going to focus very much on drylands in Asia. In Asia, drylands account for about 50% of the total cultivated area. And as we all know, these are the areas with the highest level of poverty. These are the areas with crops that are grown that are important for the poor, crops such as millet, sorghum, pulses, etc. But crops that are grown in very low productivity, overall low soil fertility, very poor resource base, very high loss of biodiversity. So this is kind of the state of the drylands as we see them. And the populations living in these areas also have very high levels of malnutrition, child stunting, etc. And as we look ahead, the drylands face enormous challenges in terms of climate change, the impacts of climate change with high temperatures, increased incidence of droughts, etc. And that's something we know and we talk about. But things that we don't talk about in terms of stress to the drylands is very high demand for dryland crops outside of the drylands. As diets are diversifying, as incomes are rising, you find that consumers' demand for oil seeds and pulses have been increasing. And that's put increasing stress on increasing supply of these crops from dryland areas. Another thing that we don't think about often is the role of trade. As countries like India demand huge quantities of food, especially oil seeds and pulses, these crops are being grown outside of India, in dryland areas outside of India, and then shipped into India. So the demand for food in India can then lead to increased dryland production outside of India and increased stress outside of India. So that trade interrelationship with dryland agriculture is something that has not been noticed enough, but is an important part of what we see happening in the drylands as we look ahead. And as we look at this situation of the drylands in the future, one can think that the drylands are going to be increasingly under stress and increasingly desperate. But I actually have a much more optimistic view of the future of the drylands. And I have a more optimistic view because I see that the crops that are being grown in the drylands have a renaissance happening to them. A renaissance because of rising demand for health foods. So as the urban middle class demand for more healthy diets improves, then the demand for millets, demand for pulses, etc. increases. As the interest in plant-based food increases, the demand for soybeans, demand for peas, etc. increases. And that can then lead to a revitalization of dryland production systems and an increasing connection of dryland small farmers into markets and income benefits that come from that process. So that's one way I think drylands have a future for growth as the overall urban demand for healthier diets improves. The other side of the picture that I also see promising is that dryland crops tend to be much more climate resilient, resilient to high temperatures, resilient to drought situations, etc. And as climate change leads to encroachment of dryland areas into areas which were not drylands in the past, more the subhumid areas, etc., then the future of these dryland crops in those areas becomes important. So you begin to see oil seeds and millets, etc., moving upwards into areas which were more humid and subhumid as temperatures and as climate change increases. A third reason I'm optimistic about the drylands is that much of the food-based safety net programs, which were based on rice and wheat, are increasingly looking at more nutritious food coming into those programs. And sorghum, millet, pulses are crops that are increasingly moving into the safety net programs. That then provides an opportunity for growth for smallholder farmers in the drylands. So as I look at all these trends, I see that the demand for dryland crops is increasing, and the potential for smallholder growth in the drylands is also bright as you look ahead. But it requires significant innovations. It requires innovations in terms of improving overall crop productivity. It requires innovations in terms of enhancing quality of the commodities, improving different traits, the nutritive value of these crops, etc. And much of that is being done through traditional breeding activities today, but with innovations in plant breeding coming through genomics, through gene editing, there's potential for rapid improvements in overall crop productivity and improving and producing crops with very highly desirable traits in terms of nutrition, in terms of pest resistance, etc. And I think that's the role that genomics and gene editing play is something that we should be looking at as we think about the future of innovations in drylands and improved crops, crop breeding in the drylands. But it's not just breeding. The innovations that are happening in terms of agronomy, crop management, resource management, the use of big data, the use of drones and other technologies coming in can have major impacts on better crop management, smarter farming, more sustainable farming in the dryland areas. And that's a future that I think R&D investments and both public sector and private sector investments in the dryland can help in creating a smarter production system for the drylands. It's not just a farm level production that requires innovation, but beyond the farm, there's significant innovations that are needed. One of the areas I think that's particularly important is connecting small farmers to markets. And here, with the advent of smartphones, with the advent of rapid communication technologies that are available, the ability of small farmers to be to connect into markets through electronic market systems, to become more aware of better price opportunities, to become aware of opportunities for trading, long distance, etc., are become really feasible, and the ability of small farmers to be able to connect into these markets has improved significantly. But I think the ability of small farmers to bargain for better prices has still been very limited. So even as these communications innovations have improved, I think the next set of institutional innovations in terms of small farm aggregation, creating farmer producer groups, etc., and then allowing that to create scale for small farmers in order to be able to negotiate and bargain for better prices, better contracts, etc., is an area which I think would benefit dryland small farmers enormously. The next area I would think about in terms of innovation is in the whole area of food processing. One of the big challenges for millets, for example, is that they don't have a long shelf life because of rancidity problems. Now, I think gene editing can really help in addressing that problem of rancidity and allowing for a larger shelf life for these products. Also, with the interest in plant-based food, with the interest in healthy snacks, etc., there are huge opportunities for the food processing industry to take core cereals such as millet, sorghum, pulses, soybeans, etc., and bring them into the food value chain, especially into the health food value chains. And the technologies are there in other parts of the world, and certainly many of them could be applied in a developing country context, and particularly in the context of Asia and Southeast Asia. Now, I want to end on a policy note. I think there are enormous opportunities for smallholder farmers in the drylands to be able to connect to the rising demand for healthy diets, rising demands for more climate resilient crops, etc. But I think the ability of dryland farmers to be able to benefit from these opportunities also depends on a more conducive policy environment. And as long as agriculture policy continues to focus on the big three staples, rice, wheat, and maize, dryland farmers and dryland crops will always be at a disadvantage. So as we look towards the future, we need to look at a future where agriculture policy has a much clearer, more level playing field, a playing field that allows core cereals to be able to have the same incentive systems, the same market structure, the same infrastructure investments that rice and wheat have benefited from over the decades. So getting to a more crop neutral agriculture and food policy is also a very crucial element as we think about the future of dryland agriculture. But in closing, I think the drylands have enormous challenges, but I also think that there are enormous opportunities as we look ahead, especially given the technologies that are available and the innovations that can help enhance the productivity and the quality of dryland crops. Let me stop here, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Pingali, for your extremely generous remarks. You've shared so many ideas and on the challenges, but what really struck me was the opportunities and how generous you were with sharing your ideas for the opportunities and really highlighting the situation in the drylands, not just for agriculture, but for the wider system. I'm going to introduce Dr. Robin Alders now. Robin is a Crawford Fund medalist and Senior Consulting Fellow from Chatham House, UK, in the UK. Dr. Alders is a Senior Consulting Fellow with the Global Health Program at Chatham, and she focuses on policy opportunities to support sustainable livestock strategies and food and nutrition security. Robin's also an honorary professor with the Development Policy Centre within the Australian National University an adjunct professor at the Department of Infectious Diseases and Global Health at the School of Veterinary Medicine, Tufts University, and chair of the Kiuma Foundation and Upper Lachlan branch of the New South Wales Farmers Association. Formerly, Dr. Alders was the Professor of Food and Nutrition Security for the University of Sydney in Australia. In 2014, Dr. Alders won the Crawford Fund Medal for her contribution to world food security and childhood nutrition for her work on animal health. Dr. Alders has been working closely with family farmers in sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and Australia as a veterinarian, researcher, and colleague to develop sustainable infectious disease control in animals in support of food and nutrition security and systems. I'll hand over to Robin.
Hello.
We can hear you, Robin, but we can't see your slides. We've got your
pre-record, so we'll just
Okay,
try
great.
that again. If it doesn't work, there's internet fluctuates where I am in Paris. If pre-record doesn't work, I can go back and share my slides.
Okay, great.
So Rajiv, just tell me if you want me to just go and try and speak to my slides.
I think, thank you, Robin, but I think Casey is working on that. So probably this should work. They are restarting that one.
Sorry, everyone. Let's hold tight for a minute or two while we get some technical assistance.
Yeah. Meanwhile, if you have any question, please type those questions in the chat box, and then we will pick up some of those questions. Casey, are you still trying, or Pooja? Maybe Pooja, you can try then, yeah.
Please let me know once you see my screen. And
Yes,
Yes, we can see it.
Go ahead, please. Yeah. But we don't have the audio right now. Yeah, I think this will work. Thank you, Pooja.
And firstly, it's really important that I thank Rajiv for the invitation to be part of this important dialogue. He's kindly asked me to speak on policy interventions to support sustainable livestock productivity and sustainable food and nutrition security. Fortunately, it's about my most favorite topic. I'd also like to apologize that this is coming to you as a pre-recorded video. I'm in Paris this week participating in a workshop at the World Organization for Animal Health, and I thought a pre-recorded video was the safest option, just in case something goes wrong with the internet at my little hotel. Small-scale livestock production. As you know, it's really important to hundreds of millions of small-scale livestock producers across the world. Most of these producers are in low and middle income countries, but not exclusively. We also have small-scale producers in high-income countries, and in all settings, they are mostly family farmers. They make really important contributions to food and other agricultural production. They contribute to livelihoods, to human health, human well-being, and when adequately resourced and facilitated, they make important contributions to the maintenance of healthy local environments. Small stock such as poultry and small ruminants, are often managed and frequently benefit women, youth, and resource-poor households. Small-scale livestock are critical to household food and nutrition security and livelihoods in resource-poor settings. They contribute essential supplies of safe, nutritious animal source food. And this is particularly important in areas where diet quality is lacking And even an increase in small quantities of animal source food can transform the diet of women and women of reproductive age and children. Livestock producers are embedded in local networks, local economies, and local cultures. And they also contribute indirectly to livelihoods through things such as the livestock provide traction for crop production and organic fertilizers. The producers do face a number of challenges. Often producers and households operate as independent entities, and this means that they have limited bargaining power. They'll often have limited access to social protection, and virtually all have less access to production resources, less access to credit, knowledge, information and markets, and this is particularly true for women and children. In too many countries, there's a lack of incentives for youth to remain engaged in livestock production and in agriculture generally. And in countries where we do have national policies and programs for livestock, often they're designed for more sedentary livestock production systems, and they are not appropriate for pastoralist systems. Moving out from the challenges and looking about how we deal with the situation, what we want to do is achieve equitable small-scale livestock production and appropriate 21st century innovations that have the potential to reverse the trends that we've just discussed and to contribute to sustainable agri-food systems. And here, when I talk about appropriate 21st century innovations, I'm not only and not particularly talking about digital innovations only. Some of these innovations may be revisiting some more traditional production systems, more regenerative production systems that have a chance to contribute to positive livestock production moving forward. We're going to discuss 5 solutions, and the first one here is looking at secure and equitable access to natural resources, particularly land, water, and livestock genetics that match small-scale producer needs and local agro-ecosystems, and also having that access to local agro-ecosystems that can help to support resilient production, including production in harsh environments. Producers need access to productive resources. That access needs to be equitable, inclusive, responsible, and they need to be able to deliver safe livestock value chains. And what is important is for those producers to have access to input and output markets, appropriate credit, to be able to have options for value addition, to ensure that their remuneration is equitable. And as there's increasing talk of sustainable and circular bioeconomies, these principles and approaches also need to be applied to small-scale systems so that they can be adequately remunerated for their very efficient production systems. It's important that there's enhanced competitiveness and also access to inclusive, relevant, and trusted capacity development to fill information gaps across production chain, across value chains. We need to ensure that veterinary services, production services are adequately resourced to achieve effective, efficient, and equitable animal health services and practices. This is important in order to reduce the high mortality and morbidity that is a reality in too many settings. We need to be able to deliver and ensure population-level control of vaccine-preventable diseases. And by dampening down the prevalence of mortality and morbidity, this is going to contribute to enhanced and sensitive animal disease surveillance. And we also need to improve the effective collaboration between public and private sectors in relation to the delivery of animal health and production services. It's important that there's access to social protection when required, and that this social protection be tailored to small-scale production systems, and that they're designed in a way that they build resilience and reduce for emergency relief during subsequent disasters, and that they also build a pathway to resilience and greater economic opportunity. Things such as livestock insurance schemes need to be better understood and available in appropriate packages for small-scale producers. For those of you who haven't heard of the Livestock Emergency Guidelines and Standards, I commend this document to you. It's been put together over many years with excellent collaboration and involvement of producers across an increasing range of environments. If you don't know it, there's a link here. Do please get a hold of a copy. The fifth and final solution I'm going to present here is possibly the most important, and it relates to delivering supportive policy and regulatory frameworks. It's really important that there be effective and locally appropriate policy and regulatory frameworks that are synergistic across national, regional, and global levels. It's important that participatory and inclusive processes be used, both in policy review and policy design and implementation, and that there be adequate recognition of the multiple roles of livestock and the gendered dimensions of their production. Last year, during the COAG meeting, the Subcommittee on Livestock requested FAO to commence consultations on the development of an international instrument, such as voluntary guidelines, that could help to guide dialogue, policy processes and actions at national, regional and global levels to enhance the role of small-scale livestock production in sustainable development. For those of you who have the opportunity to be involved in these consultations, I really commend them to you, as it will hopefully be a very transformative activity. As we move forward, clearly we need to deliver synergistic activities across production units, value chains, and within policy and investment approaches. It's important that research and development partnerships be inclusive and adequately resourced, and that there be joint evaluation and co-creation of innovations and technologies that are tailored to the specific needs and circumstances of small-scale livestock producers. I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Do please either reach out during the Q&A session during this dialogue or contact me via email. I'd really welcome your feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Robin. Thanks in particular for highlighting the importance of thinking quite carefully about designing research and investing in livestock systems. It's a challenge. I mean, in Australia, livestock systems are king. People think a lot about it, but I know that in development it's often overlooked, and a lot of assumptions are made when it comes to research investments. I'm going to pass over to Rajiv now for the next portion of the panel session. Thanks.
Thank you, Julianne, for taking care of those speakers. I think we have another co-organizer, Dr. Ravi Khetarpal, also with us. So Ravi, if you are here, would like to hand over the session to you. Ravi had some problem with the internet. If this is the case, then I will continue. Ravi, so I'm assuming that you are not here, right? Okay, good. So our next speaker is Professor Apollinaire Dijikeng, and as Robin has really given very good presentation on the livestock, and when we talk about agriculture, so this is not just crops, and many times we feel, in fact, people like me who are coming from the crop background, we think that agriculture is only crop, which is not correct, and especially when we are talking about the nutrition system, livestock play very, very important role, and Robin has highlighted several examples. Now in the same series, we would like to invite Professor Apollinaire Dijikeng, and he is well-known scientist, and right now he is the Director General of CGIR, International Livestock Research Institute, and Senior Director, CGIAR Livestock-Based Systems in Kenya. He is also the Professor and Chair of Tropical Agriculture and Sustainable Development, as well as the Director of the Center for Tropical Livestock Genetics and Health at the Roslin Institute, a part of the University of Edinburgh. I remember 2-3 years back, my last meeting with you was there in Edinburgh. And he also serves on several scientific and advisory boards, including the Sensory Laboratory, Norwich, Kirkhouse Trust, IRD and SRAD in France, and South African Center for the Infectious Diseases Surveillance. Previously, Professor Dijikeng worked on as a technology manager, principal scientist for ILRIHA, and he then at that stage helped establish and direct the Bioscience Eastern and Central Africa, BECA. And I think this was my first meeting with Aponier, where he was that BECA director. And BECA is specialized, in fact, his research was specializing in livestock genetics and animal health. And BECA really created, or BECA helped a lot, many national programs and CGIAR centers in Africa. So we are very much excited to have Professor Apollinaire Dijikeng, who is having more than 20 years experience. And I should also mention that he has been recipient of several awards, including 2020 Nelson Mandela Justice Award, and that has been recognized by the Decade of the Health as one of the 10 people in the UK changing health. So we are very much excited to have you. Apollinaire, session, floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Rajiv. Greetings to everyone. I'm very delighted to be part of this panel. We've heard from really distinguished fellow panel members, and I relate with all the things that have been said. And thank you, Robin, for setting the stage for animal agriculture to be also highlighted, as Rajiv has mentioned. All the things you've mentioned about policy and more investment in research and development, animal health, animal welfare, really make my job relatively easy to do my remarks today. And Prabhu, thank you so much for highlighting the drylands. Sometimes they're often forgotten and seen as a problem. But I think, as you say, it's the challenges that we see in the drylands can become opportunities, not only for crop agriculture, but also for animal agriculture. And we can use that really to ensure that we restore ecosystem. We can even do carbon sequestration. We can address some of the key challenges that we all associate with. And Wendy, thank you so much. In your presentation, you highlighted the notion of partnerships. And for us at ILRI and the CGIAR, we couldn't do anything if it wasn't a partnership. And you highlighted some of the work that we feel very proud about and supporting the collaboration with your organization and other organizations. You talked about dairy capacity building and really ensuring that we are clear about how we connect innovation to impact. So all those remarks that you've offered really help me to really go straight to the point. My remarks will be centered around 4 different points. I really want to share some numbers and some perspective when it comes to livestock and animal agriculture. I also want to highlight a bit about what the International Livestock Research Institute has done over the years and highlight some of the key things that really we can talk about. And they will look back to some of the things that Robin talked about in terms of livestock insurance for smallholder farmers and all that. And I will finish this by highlighting, the construct that you're very familiar with, the CGIAR, arguably the largest global research and development in agriculture that has been in play for nearly 50 years. So there is a growing consensus that we need to transform the food systems. And I want you to leave this session today knowing that livestock is a key contributor to that transformation. And that will help us really address the sustainable development goals that we are looking at. And livestock also is an important contributor to address some of the challenges that are associated with biodiversity losses that we continue to see. And let me just mention that in the state of food and nutrition globally, we still have close to 1 billion people who are hungry. And many of those rely directly or indirectly on livestock or animal agriculture for their livelihoods. If we really want to move the needle, I think animal agriculture, of course, combined with crop agriculture, will help us to do that. And with the externalities and the vulnerabilities that we've seen for the past several years, 2.4 billion people are continuously at risk. And that's really almost 1/3 of humanity. So how can we try to provide resilience and safety nets for some of those people? And again, many people are still unable to afford a healthy diet. And the argument here is, what can a glass of milk, an egg, a piece of meat do or contribute to those people on a daily basis? And let's not forget that up to 150 million of our children are still stunted. So can we make animal agriculture work? Yes, I think the answer is yes. But at this point, I want to acknowledge some of the challenges that are associated with animal agriculture. We know the issue around the environment, the impact of livestock or animal production on the environment, and also the impact on the environment on productivity in the systems. What can we do there? And the human health challenges associated with livestock agriculture. One health, for instance, we are very, very aware of COVID and other zoonotic infections, food safety, and many of the things that we all feel about. I think these are the challenges, but the key question is what type of innovation and research and development we can really unleash to address some of this. And I'm very proud to say that I see possibilities for us to address this. And in fact, our organization has really led the way for several decades. How do we see the livestock production system? I really want to look back to what Prabhu has mentioned. We see livestock as commodities produced in 3 production systems. We have the small mixed crop livestock systems that are very common. Wherever you go, you'll see them. We have semi-intensive and peri-urban production system that you would see in the global south. And then we see the pastoral system, the drylands that Prabhu was talking about, still holding a considerable number of the animals that we rely on for animal agriculture. I'm not going to repeat what Prabhu has mentioned, but from the animal agriculture standpoint, we strongly believe that there is something that can be done to make the pastoral system, the drylands, much more functional. And in doing that, have much more integration with crop production, but in a way restore biodiversity or at least harness the biodiversity that exists in this production system. Let me also, in the second point of my remarks, talk about really the focus that ILRI has had over the decades. And I'm really delighted and very humbled to be leading ILRI. I assumed this role about 6 months ago, really driven by the excellent work that the organization has done over the last decades. And we have focused on animal health, animal welfare, and really looking at some of the animal health issues that Robin has mentioned. Do we have the right vaccine? Can we do the right disease surveillance? Can we understand the disease dynamic and the transmission dynamics? I think that has been really one of the driving force. Can we link that to animal health? And I think we have done an excellent work looking into some innovation in that space. Genetic improvement, ensuring that we have resilient animals in given production systems. And I'll highlight a little bit of what we've done. We've also taken a system approach, looking at livestock and the environment, building the evidence in terms of emission, and looking at some of the systems analysis that would help us ensure that we have resilient and really functional livestock systems. And the policies, can our work help, to drive policies or generate evidence that policy and decisions and need for their information. And we've also focused on scaling some of our innovation. It's one thing to prove that something is working, that you have an innovation in genetic improvement, animal health, nutrition, but it's another thing to set the stage for that to go really out there and have impact on thousands, if not millions, of smallholder farmers. And I think we have done that beautifully. And our vision moving forward is really to continue on the influencing and the work that we've done to ensure that we can actually create a very strong narrative for the livestock in the global south. What does livestock mean to a small scale holder in sub-Saharan Africa? It's a source for nutrition, it's a mobile bank, it's everything that is a social culture, has a social cultural dimension. Can we create that narrative for us to understand where are the interventions or the areas where we can provide strong interventions? We also want to look at the Vision 2030 with strong belief that we can provide evidence, more evidence for science and innovation to continue to help us close the productivity gap and indeed bring livestock or animal agriculture as a strong contributor to resilient agri-food systems. And let me just highlight some of the work that we have done at ILRI. 3 examples: poultry and dairy genetics. We have demonstrated that we can use latest technologies in data collection, data-driven innovation to support decision for smallholder farmers to ensure that we have resilient and the right genetics in our production system. We've done that in a number of countries. I'll be happy to really provide a bit of explanation if we have time for questions. And we've also looked at the drought risk and financing. How can we, create an insurance scheme to help us, support and have safety net for farmers who could lose their animals and actually have a payout, Robin talked about livestock insurance. We have created something called index-based livestock insurance, which is really helping farmers to have that resilience. And finally, some of our work really helping to drive policy in a number of countries, Eastern and Southern Africa, ensuring that the food systems, the livestock master plans in the countries are really developed based on the real evidence and what science can help us to do. So the next stage of my remarks will be around the CGIAR. As you are aware, the ILRI is part of the CGIAR, and the CGIAR, the Research and Innovation 2030 strategy for the CGIAR is looking at zero hunger by 2030 through science to transform the food, water, and land systems. And we do that through integration of 3 different areas. One is genetic innovation, really speaking squarely with what Prabhu has mentioned. Can genetic, genomics, genome editing help us to really accelerate productivity and resilience of some of the crops? I think the answer is yes. We can even extend that to animal agriculture. The second science areas in the CEG is really system transformation. We have to look at the system. What are the things that we really have to do to transform the systems? And the third area is really the resilient agri-food system, really a consolidation of what previous speakers and myself we've talked about. How can we make the system resilient? The science, the partnership, the innovation, private sector, capacity building, all that have to be quite integrated. And in the research and innovation strategy of the CGR, we've also taken a deliberate approach to have a very strong footprint in various areas where we work. The regionally integrated work that we want to do through the CGR is also critically important. And the final thing that I want to mention is we are doing this looking at our impact in 5 different areas. One is really around nutrition, health, and food safety. That's one CGR impact area. The second one is really poverty reduction and livelihood improvement. And that's the second impact area. The third one is really gender equity, youth, and social inclusion. We've talked about that throughout the session today. The fourth is climate adaptation and mitigation. Climate is really central to all the things that we are talking about. And the final impact area is really the environmental health and biodiversity, which is really one of the big challenges associated with us attaining or not the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think with this, I also want to finish by saying that we at the CGIAR hold about 10,000 scientists and a very strong global footprint, really overlaying on what some of the speakers have talked about here. And then we are looking into the future 2030 with a lot of optimism. I share the same optimism that Prabhu has mentioned, that with science, the right partnership, the right approach into scaling and the right investment in research and development, I think we can make a very strong contribution. Let me close by thanking you for your attention. And Rajiv and colleagues, thank you so much for setting this platform for discussion ahead of next week in Des Moines. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Apollinaire. This was fantastic. Very good interventions highlighting the different areas. But even so, when I will be speaking, I think some of my colleagues would like to have that group photo of all the participants, because at the end of those session, people will be gone. So if you can open your video, that will be good. But anyway, coming back to Apollinaires' presentation, this was fantastic to highlight about these issues in that animal agriculture and also about the different interventions, what can be done and what ILRI is doing under your leadership. So I mean that this is really fantastic. You also highlighted that several science innovations, including the modern technologies, which are very important. And so I think this is really good to work on animal agriculture as well, in addition to that crop agriculture. And Robin and you, both of you highlighted these areas. So thank you very much. Pooja, we are still in the spotlight. If you guys would like to have the picture, take it quickly after removing the highlight. Otherwise, we will go to the next speaker.
Oh, it taken, Raji.
Okay. Very good. My colleagues are very proactive and very smart people, so they would like to do some innovative thing. Thank you very much. Yeah. So so we should smile, or we are already smiling?
Smile.
This is good
We're
that we
already
can have
smiling.
Let us know when you are done. This is good that we could have capture of Professor Pingali as well. Otherwise, he was going to hit the bed, which is already very late. So we are very much grateful to you, Professor Pingali.
We did it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So this is good. Now moving forward, our next speaker is Professor Liz Corsten, and let me open. Yeah. So she is the president of the African Academy of Sciences, AS in Kenya, and also co-director for Center of Excellence in Food Security at University of Pretoria in South Africa. And we should also mention that she is the first female president of the African Academy of Sciences, which is really a remarkable thing. And she is, as I mentioned, so she is holding several other positions, including the chair of the Global Task Force for Food Security for the International Society for Plant Pathology. As an expert in food safety and regulatory control, Professor Corsten developed South Africa's first biocontrol agent for fruit and established a biocontrol research group at the University of Pretoria, focused on the sanitary and phytosanitary aspects of international trade. She is also the chief editor of Crop Protection, and she chairs the International Society for Plant Pathology Task Force, as I mentioned, for global food security. We are very excited to have you, Liz, and we look forward to hear your views on this very important topic. You are mute, Liz. If you can unmute, please. Yeah. Thank you. And go on the presentation mode, probably.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. But if you can put your slides in the presentation mode, then this will be great.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And can you hear me now?
Yes, very well. Thank you.
Okay. And once again, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm going to wear two hats today. I'm the co-director of the Center of Excellence in Food Security at the University of Pretoria, and I'm also the president of the African Academy of Science. So I'm going to touch on both. And I just want to quickly go back to the objectives of this meeting today, and it's really about sharing knowledge, experience, and discuss our required science innovation. And it's really to foster global cooperation and to achieve sustainable, resilient agricultural systems, and to work and focus on and inspire the youth. So with that, I just want to say that the African Academy of Science really focus on transforming lives on the continent. We represent the different African regions with vice presidents in each region. We also leverage resources through research excellence and leadership for sustainable development. And we are really developing think tanks, recognizing excellence and looking at and supporting STI programs. It is about people, partnerships, and excellence. And we are looking at the co-creation of African learning, education, and creation of a research environment that will be conducive and enable innovation and science excellence. We also look at global partnerships and improving and enhancing our brand and transforming the STI landscape in Africa. And very importantly is adopting and moving towards innovation and novel technologies. Second hat is more of an academic nature, and I want to touch on post-harvest technology and innovation, and specifically fresh produce, and just going through available research, published scientific papers. And it's noteworthy that the first paper was published in 1956. And it's only in the last decade that we saw exponential growth in post-harvest research. Now, to me, what was important was who's collaborating, who's generating most of this information within the post-harvest environment. And this was just one network analysis we've done. We've done a similar one for food safety. We're busy with it at the moment. But the point I want to make is that if we want to aspire to foster global cooperation, we need to understand the global community. And what is interesting is that the USA traditionally has really interacted with various researchers globally and really dominated the post-harvest environment in terms of publications, and a very strong cluster would be Italy and Spain. But I think that China and the impact of the research in China, I believe, has been underestimated. I also believe that African continent is not present. So if you look at the 6,200 publications, peer-reviewed publications, Africa is not featuring, and this has to change. The only country in this first phase analysis we could really find that's also interacting with other countries and that has a strong post-harvest presence is South Africa. What is also interesting, if we unpack the knowledge that's currently being generated in post-harvest innovation and technology, then we will note that biological control, that most of the papers focus on biological control. But what we're missing is the adoption of this technology, the green technology, and taking the innovation further and not really exploring new innovative technologies. We see a cluster of nanotechnology, but it's really not mainstream. So I believe we will see a shift in the future with technologies, AI and blockchain, and it will be interesting to see where the scientific community will focus. But one interesting area was looking at registered patents. Now, this is a project that I'm currently doing with my colleagues in Wageningen, Peter and his Ubuntu company. And what I didn't realize was that most of the current patents being filed is coming from China. And if we analyze the innovation that's been captured in that, then we will notice that there's a shift towards sensors, robotics, and IT. And I think that's significant. If we try and analyze that a step further to say, well, who's really creating this new knowledge and who's really driving it, then the bulk is with the Chinese universities. So there's a significant shift that I think is very interesting to note. And if we look at the industry, the three top being Bayer, Janssen, and Syngenta. And this, mind you, is in the field of post-harvest technology and innovation. But I think these are very important indicators for all of us to note and to consider when we look at co-creation of knowledge. I want to now go one step further and focus on food safety and very specifically touch on what we call the silent epidemic. And I want to mention this because we recently have had a cholera outbreak in South Africa with 42 people who really died. And this is really an ancient disease that we do not expect in a developing world. But the reality on the ground is we do have poor sanitation and we do not have the supportive infrastructure. So informal communities really battle with a lack of water, potable water, and are severely exposed to food contamination. And if we look at these informal food systems, we need to understand what is happening on the ground. And the reality is enteric pathogens are causing major health and well-being implications within this context. Another very important point where we really need to shift our focus to is the emerging concern around drug-resistant pathogens. And if we just look at the predictions from the World Health Organization that by 2050, we could expect 10 million deaths, and that's if no action is taken. So there is a significant shift globally, and I just want to move my slides. And it is important that we consider changing, and I'm battling to move my slides a little bit. There we are. That we consider the whole circular economy. And I want to also touch on the impact of water within the food safety systems and the issues around water policy, water regulation, and water governance, because it directly links with agricultural production. And in the middle, I've just focused on water sources, rivers, dams, lakes, the groundwater, and we know in our agricultural systems that water is often transported, it's contained in holding dams, and then used in irrigation system, and it directly impacts not only on animal production but crop production. And we do know the water is contaminated, increasingly being contaminated. And we also know that antimicrobial resistance is a growing concern within this context. How is global warming impacting on that? And what should we do around food sovereignty, water security, and water quality? And this takes me to food safety for food security. And I believe it's time that we put food safety in the middle of the table. And food safety is part of food security, biosecurity, food systems, and One Health. Yet it never receives the prominence that it should. And very importantly, if we look at the One Health dimension, I think it's important that we also discuss traditional food markets and the informal sector. And how these are impacting and interacting. Now, I want to move to one of the what I believe game changers for us, and I revisited this Inconvenient Truth, which is really an old documentary from 2006, and this is really 17 years on, and I believe the cold reality of global warming is here. It's in our face. And climate change is impacting on agriculture and food systems. And it's really, how are we going to action this? And how food secure will our future be? Are we nearing a tipping point? How safe will our future food be, given this shift in emerging and re-emerging pathogens? And can we co-create the future, the food future we want? Because this will require joint transformation of food systems. And we have to protect our scarce water resources. We have to adopt a shared vision for safe, nutritious food for all. And we have to go beyond the SDG challenges and find tomorrow's solutions today. want to end by reflecting on the tipping point presentation and planetary boundaries, Johan Rockström, because to me it was one of those a major contributions, and it really pushed me to the point where I thought, well, are we reaching a food security tipping point? Are we protecting our planet and nurturing our biodiversity? And can we create a climate that's resilient and ensures safe, nutritious, sustainable food for all? We have to transform the food system. We have to systematically eradicate hunger, reduce waste and losses, and embrace change. And very importantly, transform the food systems. I believe we have to have smarter distribution systems and shorter supply chains, and we have to get all the role players around the table, and that includes academia, government, and the food industry. I finally just want to thank Murdoch and ACR and FARA and all the other role players. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Liz, for great presentation. And I think I really, among many things, I like this one, that food safety should be put on the table when we talk about the food security. Many times we ignore, but I think this is very important that we need to consider this thing. So thank you very much. And also bringing the perspective of Africa. So I think this is very much important for this kind of session. Thank you, Liz. Now, moving forward, we would like to have some interventions from Dr. Ravi Khetrapal, who is Executive Secretary for Asia Pacific Association of Agriculture Research Institutions, APARI, based in Thailand. He's also one of the co-organizers of this session. And very briefly about his introduction, he's that in addition to the Executive Secretary for APARI, he's also serving as a chair of Global Forum of Agricultural Research and Innovations, we call it GFAR, with the Secretariat at FAO. Previously, he was part of Indian Council of Agriculture Research in India and served as the Regional Director of CAVI, South Asia. Additionally, he worked as a consultant of 12 FAO, World Bank, USDA projects in Asian countries on biosecurity and compliances to SPS agreements of WTO, and represented Asia as a developing country expert in SPS working group of STDF and also WTO. He chaired the Tropical Agriculture Platform, a G20 initiative from 2022 to 2022. He has many years of experience in strategic planning, partnership, and institutional growth for promoting the agricultural innovation ecosystems. So we are very much excited to have you, Ravi, both as a co-organizers as well as a speaker, but he's in Morocco and I think he's having some serious issues with his internet connectivity. So instead that he speaks, he has sent me few bullet points, so or I can present those bullet points on his behalf. And he would like to highlight the role of the partnership from the APARI perspective. And he says that partnership is key to success in agri-food system transformation, and which is the topic of our session. He also mentions that science innovations, they're not just about technology, but this is also about the part of that partnership. And he further says that the global level, FAO is an example of having partnership with other UN agencies, global alliances, academia, private sector, and even parliamentarians. And in Asia Pacific, we do a lot of partnership. When say we, basically APARI, they do a lot of partnership with diverse stakeholders, such as funding organizations, global agencies, local stakeholders, and even farmer organizations and NGO, including private sectors. So, and their project, they are with the USDA, WTO, ACIR, FAO, and GFAR, and they are as a testimony. And they believe in adopting partnership principles as developed by GFAR, and also collectively design projects with partners and monitoring collectively. APARI believes strongly in scaling up partnership as the key for agri-food system transformation. So in his view, so science innovation should be taken further by the partnership, and In regions like Asia Pacific, APARI plays very important role. So these were some of the points, and I can also add a few other bullet points from my side that when I was working at ICRISAT, then as a part of ICRISAT, I also participated in several of their expert consultation related to agriculture, and especially for the agriculture biotechnology, where I have seen that they bring these partners from all around that Asian Pacific regions, and they really provide a platform for linking themselves with the global organizations. On the other hand, they also help them to implement the policies and the action points through these different international organizations. So I think APARI is doing really great job. We realized, Ravi, that I could not represent you as you are. You are very energetic and enthusiastic person, but I tried my best to present some of your views from APARI. But anyway, in the case, if you can, yeah, so I think that was some of the bullet points from APARI I wanted to mention. So with these remarks, we had really wonderful session, and we got these interventions from our experts, including Professor Wendy Amberger, then Professor Prabhu Pangali, then Dr. Robin Elders, then Professor Apollinaire Dijking, then Professor Liz Korsten, and I tried to say something for Ravi. Ravi, you are there?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you. You summarized already. I was struggling in the hotel here, very poor Wi-Fi. If you permit me, I'll just speak for 1 minute.
Okay, you have 3 minutes, not more than 3 then. Okay, go ahead, please, Ravi sir. Yeah, very good. Thanks. We lost you again. It seems that internet is not helping you at all.
Yeah, we lost him again, unfortunately.
Yeah. So maybe
Okay.
in the... Are you there again or no? No, probably he's not there. So anyway, in the interest of time, we would like to take up some questions, and I already have seen several questions in the chat box. If you got some question, please keep on typing the question, will be great. If you can also mention the names. If not, no problem. I can pick up your name and also can direct the question to a specific panelist. And there was one question from Govind Raj, and he mentioned very nicely. He says that my worry is that many events talk on nutrition but does little at R&D investment. And no crop improvement programs seriously include the nutrition mainstreaming, and thus needs optimized recommendations. So this is a question to any our panelist, but maybe I can request Robin to present her view. Robin, can you please address this question?
So much. It's an excellent question, and I totally agree that nutrition is underrepresented and undervalued in many of the agricultural endeavors. It is important when we think about it within the SDGs. Nutrition doesn't sit within SDG 3. It actually sits within SDG 2, ending hunger, and that's a recognition that the key way of addressing nutrition is through a food-based approach. And I think it's very important that we encourage better collaboration between our ministries of agriculture, our ministries of health, that we look at farming and those who produce our food as key actors in the human health system. If people don't have access to good and safe and nutritious food, then they are not going to be able to lead healthy lives. So I think it is very important, and it's often underfunded. So our public health nutritionists often lament that they don't have the funding they need to be able to do thorough nutrition profiles of food. And this is a particular problem in settings with fewer resources, where local food products are also not adequately profiled. So we do need that serious investment in nutrition profiling and in understanding the different options for getting those daily nutrients that we need. But a great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin, for very good answer. This is really great. Thank you. I see another question. This is about dry regions. Okay, let me read this question. That we agree in all dry regions for pastoralist communities, grassland and rangelands are utmost important. And they say that lack of policy on grassland and rangelands management in all tropical world is one of the biggest challenge. How to mobilize governments? I know that we are not expert, I think, our thing, but even then, maybe I can request Wendy when this is question related to mobilizing the governments, and I think you are having really key positions. So maybe would like to have your perspective. Wendy, if you can, please.
Rajiv, this is a tough one because I think this is, an issue in all places in the world in terms of how you can get people to share resources and not overuse resources and not damage resources that and increasingly we need to address these because they're important ecosystems, I guess. So I've been thinking about this. I think the governments either have to regulate it, which is never popular, and even then it's hard to control. So you might put a policy in and regulate it, but you don't have resources to actually do the regulation. So I think this is one where you have to understand the different users and try to incentivize people to the different users of it in that ecosystem to understand how you can incentivize and behavior change and sharing and establish multifunctional agriculture. So I think it's one where you really have to understand the communities and the systems and the users, and it requires social science if you don't want regulation. But I think in most countries, regulation doesn't work very well in this type of resource. So I think it requires a big social science research to understand how you can incentivize change. It happens in some places. So not a very good answer, I feel. Sorry.
No, I think very close. I mean, this is very good answer. So I think this is generic thing. And as you mentioned, so like policy and involvement of the social scientists. So thank you very much, Wendy. Another question we would like to take up, and I think this is from Dr. Mehta Vamji. This is about considering global food security concerns. What role do you believe animal agriculture plays in ensuring a stable food supply? Maybe I can direct first this question to Apollinaire and then maybe Robin. So Apollinaire, you would like to give your perspective on this part?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rajiv. It is important for us to look at the numbers. So when you visit any rural home, any part of the global south, you not only see crops, you see animals. They're there for a reason, and they provide really vital nutrients, daily nutrients that are required for our newborn babies, the first 1,000 days and stuff like that. So from that nutritional perspective, it's really important. And also during moments of volatility, when crops failed and things like that, people rely on what animals can produce, chicken and things like that in the background. So we don't highlight this enough. I think that integration is really important. And bringing this example closer to me personally, I grew up in the farm where we had pigs, we have chicken, we have, all kinds of animals, small ruminants. They were there to provide resilient means. There was no bank account, there was no salary to draw from to pay school fees and buy medicine should anybody be sick. So I'm just going a long way to demonstrate really where animal agriculture plays a vital role in resilient food system, but also resilient the livelihood in general. I think is really important. Can we do more? Yes, we can do even 5-10 times more. We are not maximizing on these opportunities to bring income into people's pocket and to resolve some of the, environmental challenges that we face. Before I hand over to Robin, the nutrition question that came through, I want to flag how from the CGR, we look at it. We've created a nexus between nutrition, health, and food security so that nutrition is not always neglected. Do that as a connector to the SDGs. I think it's important for us to look at that nexus, and then we bring people or disciplines that are normally not working together to the table to work. Around the policies and government in the drylands, it's all about incentives. and community involvement. We have to create the right incentives for people, the community to be there, and really see this as a key contributor to really restoring the environment that they had long time ago. So incentive, and we could even push incentive beyond governments, carbon credit and things like that. If you're able to demonstrate how much carbon is being sequestered in those regions, there will be a payout. And if that payout comes, then you bring it to farmers. That will be a very, very good incentive. I'm really dreaming a situation where, regardless of where you are, your contribution, your effort, to improving the environment should have a real incentive directly into improving what you're already doing. So over to you, Robin.
Thanks so much, Apollinaire. I agree with all that you have said. I think it's an important question, and nourishing the human population on our planet is one of the greatest challenges we have going forward. And to me, one of the gaps in the discussion is actually understanding human nutrition. So I'm trained as a veterinarian, and we do comparative anatomy, we do comparative physiology. And as we study different animal species, what we see is that their gastrointestinal tract is different, their nutritional physiology is different. And that means that those species will have different nutritional requirements and eat different types of feed or food. So I think if we're going to look at sustainably nourishing the human population, we need to understand our own gastrointestinal tract. And when it comes to the way we use nutrients, most research has demonstrated that you get a more efficient use of nutrients when you have a diverse diet for humans. That means a little bit of animal source food with plant source food. And I'll simply give the analysis is that I would love to be able to eat only plant source food like the sheep do on my farm. But when I look at their gastrointestinal tract, their intestines are 24 meters long, and that allows them to extract a lot of nutrients from the pastures that they're consuming. For me, I only have a 6-meter intestinal tract. It means I need higher quality food in order to be able to absorb the nutrients that I need. So I think we need a much greater discussion, and agriculturalists, veterinarians, animal scientists, and public health nutritionists need to work together to come up with the messaging to build that understanding so that people understand their own nutritional requirements and how they can best meet those needs within their local settings. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both. I mean, this is very good and very nice perspective. One question to Wendy, and I think when you made your presentation and you gave different kind of innovations for making the impact, you also mentioned about the business models.
Yeah.
So can you please elaborate or tell a little bit further that what kind of business model you would like to propose for smallholding agriculture in the developing countries?
Yeah, so the thing we're usually looking at is smallholder inclusive value chains, right? And it really depends upon what the issue is in the value chain. So I'll give one where the dairy value chain model, where we worked with a processor. The processor was wanting smallholder milk because there was demand for it across Indonesia. And so the processor provided price incentives for quality improvements. So that was one business model where, and the processor also provided extension and also provided some inputs. So that's one where, you have interventions coming from the private sector, the processor sector. There's other business models we've worked on where we knew that providing enough product, so this was a horticulture example, enough fruit of a particular type of fruit that had global GAP certification and met certain quality specifications in addition to the GAP things, required farmers working together and setting up a specific type of cooperative. There's other ones where you might work and develop SME type business where you need service provision locally. So that chameleon water sensor that I talked about, that's one where there's work going on now to work with young, innovative, driven, and sometimes in some areas women, to start some SME small businesses to provide repairs to that, to provide certain inputs. And so there's all kinds of different business models, but what we're really interested in is ones that don't exclude smallholders or exclude women, for example, or don't take advantage of anybody. But we know for value chains to work well, there has to be benefits in it for every one of those players along the value chain, and everybody has to be getting something out of it. So what those business models look like, there's different horses for different courses, I guess, depending upon what the needs are of that value chain and what it looks like.
Very good. Well said. Thank you. Thank you very much, Wendy. Very nice. So one quick question to Liz probably, and this is related to food safety. So one is, what are your views that how microplastic contamination affecting food safety? And if further that if there is some solution, or what do you think to address those issues?
Yes, that's a very good question, because there's a proposal that we should consider microplastic pollution really as part and parcel of food safety. So, and one of the hazards in the food system, and it's an increasing concern, as we also do have with endocrine disruptors. And we're currently not regulating it. I'm just looking at endocrine disruptors and the lack of effective regulation within the continent and actually globally. And the same with microplastic pollution. How do we create policies and start regulating such a pollutant and a serious hazard that's increasingly prevalent in the food system? So I think this is part of the global debates we need, and a point on the agenda for WHO and FAO and Codex. So I believe we should start addressing it, and it is extremely important and increasingly important.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. There is one question from Mohammad Kaswar Alam Nadeem from Bangladesh Institute of Nuclear Agriculture. And he says that Professor Pingali said about the gene editing very powerful way to improve different important traits of crops. We know scientists worldwide are doing very well in genetic improvement of important crops, but in third world countries like Bangladesh, we are struggling to get desirable outcomes from genomics research because we don't have experts to guide us. Although we have well-equipped labs, we are staying behind because of a lack of expertise. So my question to Professor Rajiv Varshney, though I was not a speaker, but this is fine. Could you please tell me if you have any policies or to collaborate with or develop expert scientists in genomics research in Bangladesh or so? Well, first, good question. Thank you very much for this question. But one thing I would like to mention that though you are mentioning about the struggling, but I believe that in Asia continent, Bangladesh is really doing great in terms of adopting the GM technology. Bangladesh is the first country to adopt the cultivation of genetically modified BT brinjal crops. So BT brinjal, this was produced in India, but they are still struggling. India is struggling probably, and Bangladesh, you guys already released it. And at the same time, Bangladesh is also set for the release of other GM crops, including golden rice and late blight resistant potato, which have already gone through the field trial. So I think in your country, you guys are doing great. And I'm sure that even for the new technology further, the guidelines are in place. So I think this is good. Now, next question is related to the collaboration. Yes, through our Center for Crop and Food Innovation of the Food Futures Institute, we are very much open to collaborate with the colleagues like you and others in Bangladesh and other developing countries. We have some programs that we host the developing country scientists and train them in that high-end genomic science and also gene editing technologies. And also we host that different students or so. So I think these things are there. And I agree with you that especially when we are talking about this genomic science, it's always important to have the good collaboration and multi-institutional, multi-country participation or initiatives so that we can learn from each other. And then those research outputs can be delivered in the field. So that will be my suggestion. So, and I will be more than happy to work with you if you have any further question or so. Thank you. I think we will be not taking more question, but maybe this last question from Dr. Hena Upadhyay. Her question is why we are using chemical coating for shelf life. We have to use organic material coating. I don't know who would like to answer this question. Liz, you have some perspective on that. Sorry to just ask you, yeah, if you can.
Yeah, I can maybe say that there's quite a lot of development around coatings in the fresh produce industry, and a lot of coatings now incorporate, and nanotechnology is one of those technologies that we're adopting, combining it with plant extracts or essential oils to try and create that protective environment, and also to replace your so-called classical fungicides. We also see from a food safety point of view that a lot of technologies developed in the post-harvest pathology side is now adopted and dragged over into food safety in a food processing plant. So we see the coatings, we see nanotechnology increasingly being used, and also in packaging material. So the food sector is adopting it, the agricultural sector is adopting it, and it provides some kind of innovative, a new approach to a greener product at the end of the supply chain.
Thank you very much. I think I would like to thank all of our speakers once again. And I know there are several questions, but our speakers need to leave now. And I think we already had a great session where we discussed different areas, landscapes related to food and nutrition security, and especially for harnessing the science innovation for a sustainable, equitable, and nourishing food system. And I think the take-home message which I got, that we need to have really good integration of these science innovations with the different areas, including that with the development, value chain, and food processing, and also with the market and policies. And many different organizations, they are doing great work in this direction. And I think it's really important that we need to have the partnership among different organizations, with the national and international organizations, different academies. So these are some of the points which I summarized, but I think we had wonderful session, and I would like to thank all the speakers. But before that, and also that our participants, maybe I can request my colleague Anu Chitkinini, who will like to propose the vote of thanks. So Anu, can you please come in?
Yeah, thank you, Rajiv. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to all of the participants, speakers, and organizers who made this event a great success. Your contributions and dedication have truly made our session, Harnessing Science Innovations for Sustainable, Equitable, and Nourishing Food System, a very successful one. We would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our speakers for their valuable insights and expertise. We know that all of them have a very busy schedule, but they spared their time and shared their knowledge with this international group. And we are grateful to Professor Wendy Umbaker and Professor Prabhu Bengali and Professor Apollinaire D.J. King, Professor Lizzie Costin, Dr. Robin Elders, and Dr. Ravi Ketrapal. And we would like to express our gratitude to our organizers, Professor Raju Vashni from Murdoch University, Dr. Juliana Biddle from ACIR, Ms. Kathy Reed from the Crawford Fund, and Dr. Ravi Ketrapal Apadi and Dr. Agri Agumya from FARA for their hard work and dedication in putting together this virtual roundtable session. We're also thankful to the World Food Prize Foundation, especially to Ms. Natalie Binder, Senior Program Manager and the team for giving us this opportunity. And special thanks to Ms. Pooja Mathur from APARI for her support and in organizing today's event, as Pooja is having hectic schedule and also her exams are going on. Thank you, Pooja. And thanks to all my colleagues, Vanika, Prasad, and Kessi for their help. And lastly, we would like to thank all participants for their active engagement and valuable contributions toward the event. It was a great to have registration of more than 700 colleagues from the 58 countries. Thanks to all the participants. Once again, thank you all for your support and commitment to creating a sustainable and nourishing food system. We look forward to future collaborations and continued success in our shared mission. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Thank you, Anu. Thank you very much, everybody. And with these words, we close the session and we wish you good luck for all your efforts towards in this important area to contribute food and nutrition security and establishing a sustainable, equitable, nourishing food system. Have a nice day or nice evening. Thank you, everybody.